Hello, nerds. Today I have Jacob Adams, who is joining us from Florida. But before that, he was a paid staffer for the Yang 2020 campaign in Iowa. So we're going to talk about what Jacob learned, what his observations were, and how that applies to the future. But before, let's warm it up with MC Jin's little anthem.
There's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's in. Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's in. Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Jacob Adams. So you reached out over Twitter and said, hey, I used to work on the campaign. I thought I saw a lot of things that worked well and maybe things that we could learn from, and might be a good time to talk about it, especially since I think you worked on maybe some rural voters as well. So a very different kind of demographic than we're used to seeing on Twitter all the time.
Right.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So maybe let's start with a little bit of intro to you. Tell us a little bit about Jacob Adams pre-Yang 2020.
Pre-Yang 2020. That was an interesting time for me. I think that I share a lot of with people who sort of discovered Yang as I was sort of disconnected with politics. A lot of his supporters, like me, I was sort of more of on the conservative, or I was more of considered myself conservative, I guess you could say. And then I sort of had that disconnect. And then when I discovered Andrew, I think it was early 2019, that's when I sort of started to get back into it because nobody had really excited me. And then, of course, I started doing my research on him, saw the Joe Rogan podcast, which blew up, of course. And then it sort of just took off from there. I was in college, took a break to leave for Iowa, go work on his campaign because I was so inspired. I just went to his website, clicked on careers, applied, thankfully got a call back, and then sort of just went to Iowa.
What was that interview like when you applied?
So it was like I had no idea what to do because I had never had like a real, I don't know. I worked at a grocery store before that. So,
right.
And in college, of course. So no experience whatsoever. So I just basically relied on my passion just to get me there. And the interview sort of was it was simple, simple questions of like certain campaign stuff. Obviously they knew I didn't know much and knew they just wanted to know that I could put in the work in order to learn what they needed to teach me. So as long as they knew I could do that, then I guess it was okay. So I did.
And pulling out of college is not something that every parent's dream come true for their child. Did you get any quizzical looks from your family when you told them, or did you just tell them from Iowa?
So that they were excited for me for sure. Like I have a very close relationship with my grandmother, so I was sort of filling her in with all that, and she was excited for me, and she knew how passionate I was about this, and I've always have been pretty much. I've always wanted to sort of do something in politics. I didn't really know what that entailed, but as soon as I found it, they were fully supportive, so it was great. But I'm back in college now. After the campaign trail, we're back on the grind. So just kind of.
Right. Well, congrats on getting back into, finishing up or picking up where you left off of, I guess. Tell me a little bit about what that was like. Like how short of the time, what was the time horizon from you go on the website, you apply, and then you're actually in Iowa? What was it
was so quick. It was very quick. They let me know. They let me know right off the bat. That it was going to be an extremely quick process, and they wanted to make sure I was comfortable with that. And I said absolutely. So I would say I applied. I think I applied probably in like the second week of November, had 3 interviews from there, and I was driving to Iowa on November 30th. So
Wow.
yeah, so
Couple weeks.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was like a couple weeks span of interviews and everything like that, background check, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just drove. My girlfriend and I just hopped in my truck, and she, thankfully, she tagged along with me, and we went straight to Nashville, and then Nashville up to Des Moines, and then I had my first day in. Well, it was in. It was in Mason City. So yeah, rural Iowa.
So what was girlfriend's view on this? Was she like, "Hey, this is an adventure, let's do it," or is she Yang Gang or?
Of course, like she's totally Yang Gang, and she always supports my passion. So like she's the best. So she was totally right there with me.
And you guys, are you still together? I heard that campaigns can be tough for relationships.
Oh, it was super tough. Like she goes to the University of Florida, so she had to fly back. Of course, she was still in classes, and me being in Iowa so far away, we just relied on FaceTime. We relied on communication and whatnot, and it went smooth. There were some rough spots. We of course we missed each other so much, but eventually when I came back, it was it was great. So
right on. You survived. So you're back in school and same girlfriend. All right, off to a good start. So tell me a little. What was your first? What was your job? What did you do over there?
So I was hired on as a field organizer.
Mm-hmm.
Field is, for anyone who knows, is basically the starting position in any sort of campaign form. There's a lot of entry levels in campaigns, but field organizer is typically one that is popular. So a field organizer, in a nutshell, just basically tries to recruit volunteers for the candidate. They are placed in a certain area in which they oversee, pretty much try to connect with the community as much as possible, learn as much as possible about that area of turf that they have. And I was just mainly responsible for, recruiting volunteers, setting them up with specific areas to canvass, teaching them how to canvass, teaching them how to phone bank, and while doing that myself as well. So there was of course, there were quotas that we had to hit. We had to make at least 150 phone calls a day, or dials, I should say, along with however many doors were knocked per canvasser. And so I spent most of my time actually with the Minneapolis St. Paul Yang Gang. They were extremely close because that Mason City is very close to the border of Minnesota. So they were connected with me, and I worked extremely closely with them. They're amazing. And yeah, they were ready. That's one thing about every volunteer that I ever came across on the campaign, is that they were, whatever they needed to do, they did it without any questions asked. So. And
did you say you were focused on Mason City?
Yeah, Mason City. So it's a town it was about 27,000 population.
Yeah.
And it's about, I think it was about maybe only a 45-minute drive to the border. So yeah, it's a good little town though. Honestly, it had the downtown area, a lot of development and everything like that. It was a nice turf. I enjoyed it. And the people were really nice. The people that are in Mason City are extremely nice. When you hear Iowa nice and you hear about that, it's actually true. In Mason City's case, I can only speak on, but everybody there was extremely welcoming. I had supporter housing, which I was so fortunate to find that. So a lot of campaign organizers, what they try to do is when they go to places where they're not used to, like Iowa, where they're not living, people who support that candidate will house them over a certain period of time till the caucus, say like that. So I was fortunate enough to find that, and so those people who housed me were totally amazing for doing that. So yeah.
Wow. So what was the response to your kind of outreach when you told them, hey, I'm calling on behalf of Andrew Yang, or knocking on behalf of Andrew Yang? What was the general reaction?
The general reaction is always like, oh, I like that Yang guy. I like that. I like him. It was sort of like they had their first candidate. It was either Bernie, Warren, the bigger names and stuff like that. and then they often had Yang second or third, or were considering him in some aspect. I think that a lot of voters struggled with sort of his experience aspect. I think they really wanted, the electorate in Iowa especially just really wanted somebody who could compete with Trump and had the experience to back it up. So I think that it's something that we had to sort of adapt to whenever we were canvassing for Andrew. We had to really communicate with voters, saying that, like, his ideas and what he's putting forth is so ahead of like what we're seeing in this field right now, that the risk has such a high reward to it, and there are minimal risks. I was trying to communicate with voters to his experience, but if you look at his schooling experience, his Columbia Law degree, his economics degree from Brown University, when people heard that, they were excited. They were excited. Like we excited a lot of people when they knew he had that education behind him, and we told them more about his business and everything like that, what he did before. That's the main thing. Everybody tries to pin Andrew as some huge billionaire or something like that, sort of sketchiness. And I had to shut that down real quick and say, like, look, he's worth about $1 million or something. Like he's worth far less than a lot of the field. And once I enlightened people on like his background and more of what he's accomplished, and ensured them that he is not just this sleazy billionaire trying to come in here and screw stuff up, they were excited. They were really excited. That's the thing with Iowan voters, is they listen. They really truly listen. Every meeting that I went to, because a lot of the times they would have meetings with the Democratic clubs in each county, and there would be like representatives or like field organizers from each campaign, and so we would all be giving our sort of piece on our candidate to entice these voters to go tell their friends, because these people who are a part of the Democratic Party are like prominent leaders in their community. So it's important to make a good impression. So yeah, but they really did listen. Even if they agreed or didn't agree, they wanted to hear your whole piece. So it was a good experience for sure.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there was openness to learn about him, but maybe a little bit of lack of familiarity, and maybe just needing to kind of get more information on the guy. Were you surprised at the ultimate outcome on caucus day?
I think I was. I honestly, the feeling going into it was, I felt stronger. I think I just got my emotions got the best of me, and also like my experience with elections was zero. So I had never been a part of an election day. So obviously I got my hopes higher than what actually happened. I'm sure a lot of people did, and because of how excited we were about him. But I think overall, once it was all over, and I looked at the data a little bit closer after and everything like that, I was extremely proud of what happened and what we did, what we accomplished. Went from Andrew himself having an email list of just a few people to start his campaign, to what we did in Iowa and New Hampshire and everything. So it was yeah. Once it went full circle like that, and I got to see it all at once, it was it was great. I think I'm super proud of it.
What do you think we could have done differently?
Yeah, so there were a few things we could have done differently. There's always something that a campaign can do better. Specifically, what I saw was, I think that with the strategy, our main strategy was just trying to explain. We were trying to explain Andrew's ideas that were gold, like democracy dollars and the freedom dividend itself. All of these things we tried so hard to explain in full length that once we were done explaining, it's almost like we had already lost the voter. I think that because the voters were only focused on one thing. They were focused on defeating Donald Trump. They wanted to defeat Trump. And if when we tried to communicate that Andrew could beat Trump, and we sort of saw it as an obvious, but it's hard to just communicate ideas and policy to people who really only wanted one thing collectively. collectively, I would say, and some people did really care and about the policy and looked into it a lot. And obviously they chose their candidate not only based off whether they think they could beat Donald Trump, but also on policy in some aspects. So I just think that in Andrew's case, he had so much substance. You know, he had like over 100 policies, right, on his website. It's hard to communicate that in the short time span that we had. And I think that what we could have done better is if we would have just hammered down a little bit more of why we thought he was the best candidate to beat Trump, and maybe gave specific examples or something like that, hammered that down more, I think we would have been more successful. I wouldn't go as far as to say we would have won the Iowa caucus, but I think that we definitely probably would have been more successful in that aspect.
Yeah, it's for sure. I think Trump just sucked all the oxygen out of the room.
He did.
And the desire to defeat him just overcame any real conversation about like longer term things. And I found this very interesting. Have you seen this time lapse that Washington posted at Drake University during the caucus, where they showed the initial Yang support and then the people milling around? Have you seen that?
I don't think so.
All right, let me show you. It's pretty cool. I think it kind of captures what happened. Let me refresh this so you can see from the beginning. So this is at Drake University.
Okay.
And oh, come on, where's that picture? Here it is. So you see a lot of initial Yang support over here on the left-hand side.
Right.
That's like not bad actually, given that it's a first-time guy, and it actually grows. But then after I think the first allocation, when you don't have enough, they kind of transition. They get redeployed to Biden and Warren, and on the other side of the basketball sort of arena is the Buttigieg and Sanders side. But you know, if you told me that this left-hand side was for some dude named Andrew Yang who had never run for president, and this is like the first caucus of the whole national primary, that's pretty impressive. And so, like, you know, kudos to you and the rest of the campaign team that made history there. I mean, there are a lot of people that have run for president that have not gotten even, you know, 0.5%. And I think before the first reallocation, didn't Yang get like, I don't know, I think it was like 3 or 5% or something like that. So kudos to you on that. I mean, what's your thoughts on Yang going forward? Like, are you getting ready for Yang 2024? Are you moving to New York City for the mayoral thing? what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think a candidate like him only comes around really once in a while. So I think, and everybody recognizes that, thankfully. And the support around the campaign still exists even today, even though he's not running for anything currently. So yeah, I think that in 2024, once he announces, I definitely wouldn't rule out me totally just driving to New York and just doing the whole thing over again. And I'm sure everyone in my family would support that 100% too, because I'm sure, like everyone else, I totally yanged my family long ago, and so they're head over heels for him too. So you know, so yeah, in 2024, I'm excited. I think that he would be a great candidate for mayor of New York. I think that, and I think a lot of the people in New York are excited for his run as well. I've seen a lot of good responses, and I think that the campaign probably would be, this would be great now that it's just one state. We don't have to worry about the entire United States. So if we could focus on one state and we could recognize some of the things that we did before that may not have worked out, obviously the strategy is going to be a lot different. We're not trying to replace somebody, you know. The guy who's in there right now, he's leaving, he can't run again. So we have to prove why he's the best candidate in the field. We have to connect with the most important thing is connecting with the people in the community. We have to realize what the issues are how we can fix them. And I think that Andrew does the best at that. He sees problems and he gives real solutions. There are no remarks, there are no beating around the bush or anything like that. And I think that's why he got so much support. That's why he is somebody who ran for president, who no one knew, and gained that sort of popularity is because he does not he doesn't fiddle around. He goes straight for the solution, and does his best to figure it out. So I think that's what the people of New York deserve. I think that's what they want. And yeah, they just deserve somebody who's going to take action. So they need, I think Andrew will do well there. It just, every campaign needs to run smoothly. I think that the next time around, the campaign will obviously learn from some mistakes that were made in Iowa and everything like that, and obviously just become better. So I think that we're definitely set up for success in New York.
One thing that you mentioned, Jacob, was how there were a lot of kind of first timers in the Yang 2020 campaign in terms of the campaign team. Part of me wonders, like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you're trying to field a campaign in Iowa and you haven't had a bunch of people that have done caucuses like multiple times and ran, field operations and phone banking and all that stuff, that you're not gonna. I mean, the fact that he got 5% in the first allocation is amazing.
Yeah.
Part of me wonders, like, well, who knows? Like, I've never run a campaign in New York City. I would imagine the New York City mayoral politics is an art and a science. Do you worry a little bit that, like, he's going to have another Iowa on his hands in terms of, like, great ideas, great candidate, super fired up team, people working their tail off, but just not enough kind of, mileage in that environment to navigate it successfully? Well, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It could go that way, but I'm feeling confident this time around because you have people like me who it was their first time. It was my first time. It was extremely hard for me to get volunteers in the area. It wasn't hard for me to get volunteers that were from Minnesota. It wasn't hard for me to get volunteers from out of state because there were so many people out of state that were excited about Andrew, but it was extremely hard for me to get volunteers and get people motivated in the state of Iowa in our area because, I think I would attribute that just to my lack of experience because there are certain things that come with recruiting volunteers, like your hard ask and everything like that. They teach you as you're learning to phone bank, as you're learning to text bank, when you're talking with voters, you need to be explicit, or you need to be specific with your ask. You need to know what you want them to do, ask them specifically, not stutter, don't, be nervous. You need to have a real conversation. And I think that over the time when I've went from the Yang campaign to, organizing together 2020 to the Biden campaign, over this time of learning for me, I've gotten to perfect things like that. And so I feel like it would be super beneficial for me, especially to go to New York, take these practices that I've learned and dish it out to everybody that I possibly can, because these are real tactics that win elections. I'm a full believer in grassroots movement, no matter where it is. And as long as we can do a little bit better with grassroots movement, and I know the Yang Gang is 100% innovative when it comes to digital organizing and reaching out online. I think that if we do a lot of that, if we do that to as best as we possibly can, it's going to be hard to compete with us. It's not about, like, the candidate goes far, right? But what goes the step further is the support and the willingness to put the work in. So as long as we're willing to put the work in and really dedicate ourselves to this mission or to this movement, then exactly like we did in Iowa, but just learn and use new tactics. I think that it'd be different from Iowa. I think it's going to be much different from Iowa. especially because it's not leading into other states. It's just New York, right? So
Yeah.
I think that
A question from Harkins Aquatics. What was the hardest thing about working in a rural community versus what you were observing or observed in other types of areas where the campaign was running?
other than things being super far apart and me not knowing how to drive in the snow whatsoever. Uh, so it took me forever to get to places. I think that the hardest part was um, hardest part. I think that, learning your community, learning
Mm.
everyone who lives there. You got to reach out. You can't be shy. Like I was shy. Like at first I was extremely shy. I didn't know anyone. I had only a couple people I was talking to. I was just talking to people on the campaign. I think that when you get into your turf, when you get there, you need to just go out. Obviously this was before COVID, so you need to go out. You need to shake people's hands. You need to meet people. You need to talk to them. You need to ask them what are they looking for in a candidate. You need to just branch yourself out as much as possible to where people are like, hey, that's Jacob, or hey, that's so and so. They need to just know your name, and that's what works in a rural community. And I didn't really, I wasn't necessarily used to that. So here in Florida, I think we're a little bit different. I mean, I wasn't from like the biggest city, but we weren't as like closely knitted in the community as they are in rural Iowa. So it's a huge learning curve when you find a community that is so tightly knit. You have to be extremely respectful to everyone because everyone talks to everyone. So you need to be, I was a representative of the Yang campaign. So at all times, no matter who I'm talking to in town, you need to recognize that and be respectful to their community. So, but as long as you get to know the people and learn it, I think you're set up for success, but it's hard to get used to that.
Did you observe anything, Jacob, that the Buttigieg or Sanders campaign was doing in Iowa that in hindsight, you're like, oh yeah. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Buttigieg's camp specifically, they did an amazing job with relational organizing. I worked with a lot of people on campaigns after Andrew that worked on Buttigieg's campaign, and I was asking them, and a lot of leadership was from the Buttigieg campaign because of how successful they were, and I learned about relational organizing, and that is specifically what they would do in Iowa. Is they would hold these sort of like mini parties in people's homes. And so when they would have one of their super volunteers host this mini party in their home, invite their friends, and then what they would do at the end is they would pick someone else to host the next one in their home. So this would happen. Yeah, this would happen over and over and over again until the Buttigieg campus had a party in pretty much everyone's home in town. And it's like, I have only been at their doorstep and it's seen me for maybe a second, and they're having a whole gathering for more than an hour. So it's like they took relational organizing to a new level, and they just got to get super close to the community. And of course, they had much more time than the Yang campaign had, because of course we started in early December, really didn't have a full staff until New Year's. In the Buttigieg campaign, I think, was there months before, but they really took it to a whole new level with getting to know the community, and that's why you saw so much success.
Yeah, I mean, it is a pretty impressive. Like, this guy is a mayor of a pretty, not a huge city in Indiana.
Exactly.
And he actually beats Bernie Sanders in Iowa. So like, you got to take your hat off to the dude.
You do.
So tell me a little bit about, like, some people are worried about the New York City thing. Like, if Yang loses, it could be a pretty hard blow to his brand as a candidate. Do you subscribe to that, or do you think, like, hey, if he makes a good showing in New York City the same way or maybe better than he did in Iowa, like, it's still a win? I mean, he's still going to kind of grow his footprint What
Yeah.
are your thoughts?
Well, running for mayor of New York City is, I would say, harder than most gubernatorial campaigns.
Mhm.
So, New York City is obviously so vast, massive amounts of people. It's almost like it's bigger than a lot of statewide uh, governor runs. So I think that if he does lose, I mean, if you look at the field already, it's like another Democratic primary. There's so many Democrats running for mayor of New York City as of right now, or exploring that fact to do so. So I think that if he does, if he does end up not winning, I don't think that it's going to be the end all be all. It won't be a huge. It'll be a blow, of course. We don't want that to happen, and we're going to work hard not to make that happen. But I think that it's still a big ask. It's still a big ask for somebody who does not have, the experience, you would say, to a normal voter when they're looking at him. He hasn't held an office before, and so I think we're going to be dealing with voters who still think, if he hasn't held an office before, then what makes you think he's ready for the mayor's office, especially in the biggest city, one of the biggest cities in the United States. So um, we have to combat that. We have to communicate clearly of what he's trying to do, and I think win people over with. I'm a firm believer in just winning, not winning people over, but like communicating solutions to what the problems are in the city. So if we can't benefit the city, if we can't change uh, the problems that are occurring in their own lives, then we can't expect to have a chance. And I think that's why Andrew has such a good chance, because he really wants to make a real difference. He's not a politician that tries to make this his full-time gig just to have money or anything like that. Like he does this because he really does want to make a difference. So I think people are going to love that in New York. They need something like that.
Well, speaking of New York, I just noticed there was a new poll, and I figured we could just kind of look at it together.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of encouraging. Before we do that, let me show everyone the last Iowa poll. I know people hate on polls, but here's the last Iowa poll predicting that Andrew Yang had about 5% support.
Wow.
And he ended up getting, in the first allocation, 5% support. So, I know polls can have issues, but they're not. I don't think it's fair just because it puts your candidate lower than expected doesn't mean that's a terrible poll.
Right.
On the other hand, for New York City, everybody had talked about this very famous Stringer media poll, and it was like, oh, Yang's leading. He's the top. He's actually number one. And I did a live stream kind of breaking down those results. But, in the back of your mind, you're always wondering, like, well, there was one poll where Yang kind of nationally in 2020 for the presidential, like, broke double digits. I think it was like started with an E. I can't remember. But either way, that was like, yeah, Emerson. Yeah, that might have been it was a fluke. But now we have a second poll for New York City that was just conducted about 10 days ago. So pretty recent. And it's not by Stringers, by another polling outfit. So let me just show everybody. This is just released on December 21st. Conducted by Public Policy Polling of 750 likely Democratic primary voters. And if you look here, who's got the most support? Andrew M.F. Yang, 17%.
Yeah.
Although Eric Adams does have 16%, and then a good 40% are unsure. So this is not. Let's not consider this a done deal.
Don't put this by your bedside.
Yeah, but certainly this is it's way better than the 5% Des Moines poll. Basically in Iowa, we were looking like a Morales or a Stringer. And now we're looking more like a Buttigieg or a Sanders. So very, very encouraging. But, 40% is still on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I also heard that, do you remember the viral video of the, big bodybuilder guy going through New York City and giving out $1,000 to everyone?
I
You,
don't. What
you
was that?
don't? I don't remember his name, but it was this huge macho guy, and it was so funny. Him and his friend, I believe, they sort of had some online popularity, I assume, and so they were walking through the streets of New York City, and they were giving people. This was during Andrew's 2020 run. They were giving people $1,000 a month, or I'm sorry, $1,000 to signify like how significant this could be for your life if Andrew was elected president. And I think that's a lot of people in New York do know who Andrew Yang is. So I'm not surprised. I'm not going to be totally surprised, if he does really well, because people know who he is in his home state. It's Andrew Yang. His popularity is rising increasingly by day. And I think that once the Yang gang allocates their time into New York, they're really going to know. So it's exciting.
It's also encouraging to see that when you ask Democratic voters in New York what they care about, obviously the virus is top of the list, but also improving wages and creating more jobs is a close second. And then criminal justice reform is third. And I'm curious, obviously, I think he has a great story. The affordable housing and crime reduction are two other ones. So like he certainly, you could argue with the UBI kind of reputation, he's going to have a good story on wages. So for this 17% that care deeply about that.
Yeah.
You could argue that basic income does change the equation on crime, certainly helps with housing and crime reduction, maybe not as much on criminal justice. So I guess the two things that we're going to need to see Andrew step his game up is probably around coronavirus and criminal justice. What are your thoughts? Do you think he can go from the $1,000 a month guy to someone who can actually lead the city through this pandemic recovery, but also the criminal justice and police reform? What are your thoughts there?
Yes, I think that, Andrew himself, he can recognize a problem and create a solution himself. So, and with people around him, he has a really great team, assuming that he has some of the same people around him for this. I think that when it comes to coronavirus, there are already great protocols laid out, and I think improving upon them, I'm sure he's already thought of ideas on how to improve those. So as long as they're, it's got to be in the best interest of New Yorkers. It has to be, we have to protect them. We have to make sure that Andrew can offer them and promise that he could have the funding and allocate the funding necessary to keep them safe. I think that's what everyone wants. Most people who are aware of the virus, who want to stay protected, they just want to be reassured that the funding is going to be there for them. They're going to be taken care of. The risk is going to be minimal until we can get the vaccines distributed. And I think that's one of the bigger things going into this run is that, how vaccinations are going to be continuously distributed throughout New York City, right? I mean, do you expect vaccines to be still distributed in time or still happening when the primary is ongoing, right? I would say, yeah,
for sure. It's going to take quite a while.
Yeah, exactly. So since that's going to be happening as Andrew's running, that's going to be a key point, is that how can we keep this up, or how can we improve what's already happening? I think that he's going to have a lot to grasp because we'll be seeing it in real time. So he'll be able to figure that out for sure, and we'll get behind that. And then for criminal justice, I think that he had a great idea with decriminalizing marijuana and letting everyone go and giving them a high five when they leave for their nonviolent drug offenses, because it doesn't make sense to have people incarcerated for a nonviolent drug offense. It does not. So I think that if he could do something of that aspect in New York, or he could sort of push that agenda, it would be successful. So I think he's already had a good record on that. So I think going forward, yeah, I think he can hit on a lot of things, but especially jobs and wages, and how he can sort of, his whole thing is moving into like the new economy, right? He sees what's going to happen. We have to recognize that our economy is shifting. So in order for he can be the person to lead the way for New York, to adapt to that new economy and to whatever new jobs come in and what old jobs are leaving. So he's got, I'm sure it would be a good benefit for New York for him to lead them through that.
It will be super interesting to hear Andrew talk about racial justice, police reform. These are not topics that he's leaned into as much in the past, but it certainly seems like if you're going to win in New York, you're going to have to have a, basically as fresh and kind of thoughtful a plan for those topics as you do for poverty and automation of jobs.
Yes.
And I agree with you. Like, this is not a guy who just kind of wings it. So I suspect the Yang for Mayor website is going to have a few detailed plans on it.
Yeah.
if history, yeah. So we'll have to watch that very closely. And Jacob, I want to thank you for spending time with us in the Nerd Zone. Before we wrap up, are there any other topics or thoughts that you want to share with people, as part of this conversation?
I don't know if anybody has a question in the chat or anything like that, or anything.
Someone was asking, how do you have a Twitter account and how they can follow you?
Is there any way I can leave it somewhere?
Yeah. Well, why don't you say it and I'll try and put it in the as a banner as well.
Okay, it's capital J, capital L, capital A, and then DAMS, capital F, capital L.
Or so, JL Adams, Florida.
Yes.
JL Adams FL.
There.
Right on. So follow Jacob, JL Adams FL, on Twitter. Are you active on YouTube or other platforms, or is Twitter your main?
Twitter's my main thing. Mm-hmm. I sort of like tweet my my 2 cents here and there. So
yeah.
But yeah, I think that.
How you feeling about, we started the interview talking about how in Iowa everybody was focused on removing Trump. How are you feeling about the presidential sort of state of affairs today? I mean, because we kind of he is technically, I mean, I guess it's debated whether he's been removed or not, but I
mean, we haven't seen in a while, that's for sure. He's being pretty cowardly, not a leader for sure. So I think it just shows when he called for $2,000 a month, when he was not for that same bill that was proposed 7 months ago, or when this pandemic was still new, or newer. He doesn't have an agenda. He doesn't have a policy. He doesn't have a specific anything. As of right now, he's just there to be there. In my opinion, is that whatever he says or tries to do, it's to try to maybe distract from something else. I mean, you saw him advocate for $2,000 a month checks, but then at the same time, he's handing out pardons like they're free cupcakes. So I think that he's mostly just trying to cover himself up with whatever he's trying to do. And I think that he isn't in the public eye right now. He's not doing interviews. He's not taking questions for reasons, because he's trying to give out all the pardons. He's trying to do everything. And trying to sweep it under the rug and have the American people not realize exactly, because we're dealing with a pandemic. We're, you know, in the thick of it, one of the worst places we've been, and our leader is nowhere to be found right now. So and I think he's just trying to hide things. He's not trying to be, he's never really been transparent, but this time more than ever. So I think going forward, I just can't wait. How many more days is it till inauguration?
I think it's 25.
Who's counting? You know, so inauguration day is going to be great. I think he said he's going to be having his own sort of super spreader event, wherever that may be. But when Biden is inaugurated, and what he says is that the country will start to heal on inauguration day. I think that is true in an aspect, because, you know, we'll be 100% done with Trump. It's time for somebody to get in there that can do the job, that can protect the United States from this pandemic and take it 100% serious. And I think that having Biden in this time of vaccination like distribution is key, and it's very important. So I think that it sucks to see Trump do all of this and us sort of just sit here and be like, okay, well, he's totally non-existent and we can't do anything about it really. But the sooner that he can go, the better. So
yeah, I agree. It's rich that they've been negotiating this stimulus for 7 months, and then to wait till the Congress and Senate actually pass whatever, you know. Yeah, I'm not in love with the way it came out, but it was passed. And Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury under Trump, was part of that negotiation for those 7 months.
Yeah.
So to wait till after it passes and almost like on Christmas Eve say, well, this is a disgrace. It's like, well, where the hell have you been, man? Like, you have almost 100 million Twitter followers alone. Yeah. You've never talked about what your stimulus plan is, other than to just kind of poop on what your own party and the Democrats agree to with your own Treasury Secretary. So it seems so kind of transactional and kind of like impulsive for him to talk about these things and not put in the work. Yeah. But you know, I can't say I'm surprised, but I'm still disappointed. Yeah.
When I hear, like, these negotiations are just so odd to me. It's odd to me that Republicans can advocate so much for it's odd to me that like Republicans can advocate so much for the national debt and take it back to the national debt or try to make this sort of like we have to save money in this aspect, when we're not trying to save money when we're funding the military more than the next 8 developed countries combined. But we are trying to save money when we're trying to protect our citizens and making sure that they have food on the table. This is something that I tried so hard to relay in Iowa. Is I would have a bulletin board, or I'm sorry, a whiteboard, and I would say 27,000 times every person gets $1,000 a month. This would bring in this much money into Mason City every single month. This would absolutely transform this society that we know in this city. They had a mall that was closing, and this would bring things back to that mall. This would, build things up again, get things moving in every single city. So I think that, so this is a country that can afford whatever it wants in regard to the military, but it can't necessarily feed every single one of its citizens, and chooses not to. It chooses not to. So I think that the fact that other countries are getting things every single month and we haven't seen anything for months. The last we saw was $1,200, and that maybe last people the end of the month, not even. People can't cover cost of rent. People can't buy things. Like, the economy's not doing well for consumers, of course, and business, because people can't spend money. People can't go out because of the virus and everything like that. We just haven't our government hasn't done a good job with laying the groundwork so people can adapt to something like this. It's sort of like the government just said, oh, it's on you guys and you guys figure it out. And that's why you see the spread. Not everyone's setting the right example where it needs to be. So
yeah, and that's an interesting connection between the pandemic mitigation and the economic support, because it's hard to tell everybody to stay in your pod, avoid large groups, don't travel, and tell everybody like, well, you got your $1,200 earlier in the year. That's it for you. You wish there were a pandemic basic income combined with the mitigation so that it could kind of take at least a little bit of the edge off economically for people. And if you do the math, what we spent already for the stimuli bills that have been passed, plus the 900 billion coming up, if most of that or all of that were put into a basic income, every adult citizen would have had $1,000 a month for almost 20 months till the spring of 2022.
yeah,
I mean, think about what a difference that would have made. But instead, it went to different places. It went to American Airlines. It went to Ruth Chris Steakhouse. It went to, some small business loans. But even those, like, there are a lot of fraud and kind of like inefficiency there. But neither party had been willing to advocate for direct cash support, and it's unfortunate. I'm disappointed in both the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans for just basically saying reopen the country like COVID's not real, but also the Democrats for always assuming you have to have some huge government program versus just trusting people to make the best choices for them and their families. But
yeah,
I guess that's why we all backed Yang in 2020, and hopefully we can see more of him in 2021.
I know. I hope so. So it hurts. It hurts to see if we would have had that. We need basic income for things like this. When a pandemic happens, who knows what's going to happen in the future? We're going to need disposable. Every family needs disposable income. They're going to need income coming in from more than just one source. In this country, there are so many people that rely on one source of income, and when that one source of income is done, everything starts to fall apart. So it's hard. It's really hard to see that. And I think that going forward, a lot of people, I mean, UBI's, people who approve of UBI and who want UBI was less than 10%, I think, before, before Andrew ran, and now it's above, 70 or something?
Yeah, it's about 70. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing how far we've come. And I totally agree with you. This won't be the last crisis that the country encounters, whether it's the next pandemic or it's job dislocation or it's climate. I mean, there's just all kinds of we're gonna have some rough seas, and having some support for everyone seems like a logical thing to consider. And hopefully we'll get from 70% support to actually action in the White House and the Congress at some point. But in the meantime, I will wrap it up there, Jacob. I've got to jump to a 10 o'clock meeting, but really enjoyed our conversation and appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience in Iowa. For anybody else who's watching this live or on replay, please give us a like and a share, subscribe, help support the channel, and make awareness of these kinds of conversations more broadly available. With that, we're going to say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds.
Love it. Thanks, Jacob.